Great. Well, let's continue this trend of trying to encourage you guys to do a little bit of innovation, if we can. I'm going to show a little video which is reminiscent of and speaks to some innovation that I've done in my life. As mentioned, I've done a few things. This is one of them. Right, so that was Android soaring to 100 million devices sold, and that's actually about 9 months old and about a million, actually it was soaring to 1 million devices, and it has since doubled that, so we've actually now sold 200 million devices. So that was going to 100 million, we've now sold 200 million Android phones. And that's a ride that I was fortunate enough to have been a part of. As mentioned, I was co-founder of Android, co-founder of another startup, Wildfire, before then, and I'd like to talk to you about those startups, what it's like to build something like that, what it's like to be a part of that ride, and most importantly, to convince you guys that you can also be a part of that ride. Best way to do that would be for me to have my notes, which I think might have gone with the pad of paper that went away, or no? Brilliant, which I now have. So this ride that I went on, as mentioned, Android's now sold 200 million phones. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, we're averaging about 550,000 activations every single day. There are 500 different models of Android phones. They're being shipped on almost every carrier network. But the key thing is, you can start a company like Android as well. You should. I'd love to see you starting to do that now. There's no reason why you can't do that right here in the city of Boston. I've been a part of 3 startups that I was directly, in part, responsible for helping to create. And I've helped numerous other startups, all here in Boston, where we have the resources, the venture capital, the funding, the mentors, the universities, like this great university, to help you with all of the sort of building blocks, tools, and guidance that you need to create something amazing. As I mentioned, I started my startups here, I should say not long ago, but it was actually quite a while ago. This is my bad file photo of me in the research lab that I had up at UMass Lowell while I was working on my PhD, literally some 23, 24 years ago, probably. Bad suit, bad hair, bad glasses, but in this case we were teaching 9X that you could order pizzas over their cable network. And in fact, we were live talking to a guy at Domino's who held up the pizza for the 9X guys I had assembled in the room. We also played with some hardware, as you see down below, because we didn't have the internet back then, so we had to keep ourselves a little bit preoccupied, not just fumbling with bits of software, but also with hardware. But the key thing is, I was doing research, student, frankly not great at the academics piece, much better at being passionate about things that I wanted to build, and having that passion effectively drive me through the academics, through my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, as opposed to having the academics the other way around drive me, which I don't think it really matters. The key thing is have passion about something that you want to be doing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I have a sort of philosophy about starting startups. I think there's, or at least my own experiences as to how to create really big and amazing companies. And one of them is to not know what's not possible. And that was the case in one of the first startups that I started, which was Wildfire Communications. But if you want to build something amazing, in this particular case, it was not know your limits, not know boundaries, have an amazingly big vision, even if other people say it's bold, hard, or impossible. And then if you think it's achievable, because it's not, I wouldn't suggest that you run off and do something that's impossible, but if you think it's achievable, you think you see a path as to how to do it, I encourage you to go do it. We built something called Wildfire, again, about 20 years ago. Wildfire was a voice-based personal assistant that helped you to effectively talk to an information system to get work done, but it was anthropomorphic. It had a personality. In our analogy, it was like ringing up an old telephone and getting Mabel back in as the operator back in the office and asking Mabel where Doc Brown was, and Mabel was that central hub for communications. She knew where everyone was, knew how to reach them, and could plug you together and get you connected. So 25 years ago, we had this vision called Wildfire, and it's funny how it's come back around because Siri, having been launched, we're getting all these emails from people saying, hey, remember why it's just like Wildfire? But the key thing was that vision, while edge of the art and sort of bleeding on the edge of the art, we were able to build, because we constrained the problem enough, we were able to build something that was usable. Now, we weren't from the telecom industry. We didn't know that people didn't think this was possible. This was the area of DTMF touch tones. When you pressed a button on a phone, it made a tone, and that's how you navigated through menus and hierarchies. We wanted to use voice. Speech recognition worked, but nobody was really commercializing it yet. And when we were first demoing this on stage at the big conferences, people would like lift up the curtains under the table. They were looking for the person, sort of the Mechanical Turk problem, where they just assumed that we were faking it. And we were able to create this illusion, build this personality, largely because we just saw no boundaries, and we wanted to deliver on this vision, and that's what we were very focused on. Now, we were venture funded. We had funding from 2 local VCs, Matrix and Greylock, which are both actively still funding companies today. Ultimately, we sold this company to Orange, the European telephone mobile phone operator. And Orange launched Wildfire. It had a bit of a life there, but when you sell things to large telephone companies, you can never easily control their destinies. I started a venture fund there as well, as I've done help Google do. The venture fund at Orange invested in a number of companies. One of those was a company called Danger, which was building this phone called the T-Mobile Sidekick, started by Andy Rubin. And it was with Andy that ultimately, after selling Wildfire to Orange and launching the first Windows mobile phone and having some fun for about 5 years at Orange doing innovative research and venture investing, we decided to start Android. Now, the interesting thing from Wildfire was Bill Warner, who was the original visionary and my co-founder at Wildfire, had a vision that he wanted to create the world's most popular software ever. That was his vision. And he figured, well, if I want to do that, it has to work on the telephone and spread like wildfire. That was sort of his thinking. Now, the funny thing is things sort of come around. We didn't actually do that at Wildfire, but we're sort of on the path to doing that with Android, building the most popular software ever. 200 million phones, 500,000 new per day. We're on that rocket ship to do that. But I think it's important to understand this story of Android as well, because most people don't realize Android was also a startup. A lot of people know it came from Google and see it coming from Google, but it was really just a couple of guys. Andy and another guy, Chris White, had the original idea to build an open platform. They were focused on cameras. I had tried to launch a Windows mobile phone when I was at Orange, was a little concerned that if somebody controlled this mobile phone platform, which was, these are just mobile computers, they're wirelessly connected, big screens getting bigger every day, that if somebody controlled this platform in the same way that I had seen desktops controlled, that would be bad for innovation, right? If you look at the desktop environment, very few word processors, very few spreadsheets, this very controlled environment. We wanted a more open world for mobile phones, and so we went down the path of setting out to design Android. And we could have been a very successful venture-funded startup. We had term sheets coming in. We had a vision for what we wanted to build. And in telling the story, we also started to go out and talk to big companies, Google being one of them, and said, hey, if we build an open phone platform, do you think Google might want to have a Google brand on a phone? Now, our goal was just to help get funding for our startup. We wanted the VCs to see name brands like Google saying, oh yeah, an open mobile phone platform sounds good. We thought it would get the valuation up. Google, however, latched onto this idea that we were, one of the slides in our deck that said, if there isn't an open mobile phone platform, somebody's going to control that ecosystem, and that's really bad. And so it was Larry Page at Google who who thought that it would be a bad idea for somebody to control the mobile phone ecosystem. He saw that these things are just wirelessly connected small computers, and Larry suggested that Google acquire Android. And there was some bumpy road in between, you know, that initial idea and it actually happening, but it's been an amazing partnership and connection ever since. And I think it's an example of my second rule, you know, for what I think helps start innovative startups, which we'll get to in just a minute. First, though, I want to loop back to you guys and what it means to create a startup, because both inspiring is also setting expectations, because being a founder can sometimes be a lonely and challenging experience. There's, you know, as I said, one great way to do a startup is to do something that other people think is impossible, right? So try peddling the impossible idea. It takes a while, right? Have that idea, build prototypes, show people, prototypes fall apart. But ultimately, I think the reason a number of us do it is for the thrill. We're inspired by it, right? We want to cross that chasm, get to the other side, see our idea realized, and we're not afraid ultimately to take those first couple of steps and do it. And those first couple of steps can come in many forms, right? Matching yourself up with somebody who you think you're really connected with to build the prototype, or just going and talking to people, you know, if, you know, don't you think X or Y is a huge problem and don't you wish there was a good solution for it, and get some, you know, feedback from people that way. Or what if you could do X or Y, would you be excited about it? And so I think the key thing to help you get across that wire, though, is to ultimately be passionate about whatever it is that you decide you want to go off and do. Have a huge, you know, feel it in your gut, believe that it can be done, believe that you can do it. But also, you don't necessarily have to believe that you're doing it alone. There's no reason why not to do it with others, to get support, and that's where I think, you know, a key thing in terms of, you know, how I look at building a startup. In my first case, I mentioned, you know, both Avid and Wildfire. Bill Warner, who was the original founder, has been a great mentor to me both in those days and since that time. My professor back at university, Pat Krolak, an amazing resource for me and an amazing mentor in terms of convincing me that I could do certain things that I didn't think I could do, and pushing me across the edge. And then as you start to go down the path with your own idea, it's getting advice as to, you know, what does one need to do in order to raise funding? How complete does, you know, do you need a prototype, right? Do you need customers? Do you need to show user traction? What, you know, do you need patents, right? There's all of these questions that you'll have as you start down this path, innovating on your own. And so mentors are terrific for that. And by the way, you know, the passion, you know, that I keep mentioning to doesn't just have to be your own. It can be a co-founder. So if you don't have, you know, if you know you want to be a part of a startup, if you don't have that idea just yet, that you know what it is that you want to do, there's no reason that you can't go and seek that from somebody else who you work with, a colleague. Maybe you're talking to two people and you both have an idea, and so it's a matter of testing them out and seeing if your relationship survives picking one and having one try and drop one aside. But the key thing is either yourself or with a collective group of people try and go off and do that. And that's, again, where Boston is a fantastic resource, because if you check VentureFizz or any of the other sites that are around, you'll see that on any given week, there are, at this point, you know, a dozen or more opportunities to go to a startup cafe and talk to somebody about your idea, or see a business plan competition set of pitches, or you know, or just have a meetup and talk to other people about startups. So I encourage you to sort of look and see which of these opportunities, you know, or, you know, seek out these kind of social environments where you're sort of rubbing your connective tissue with other people's connective tissue and trying to, you know, get the innovative flow going between yourself and between others. Stuttering a little bit because the great laptop is sort of given me the spinning mouse of death, so it's not moving, but that's quite all right. So I think the slide that you'll miss, unfortunately, is the slide of my 2 kids fishing. And that brings me to this, I said there were 2 rules for sort of, or that I had that I thought were for starting amazing and innovative startups. The other one, and the fishing analogy, is that is it skill or is it being where the fish are, right? So there's an amazing amount to being at the right place at the right time. And now this doesn't mean that that's the only way to be successful or that that's going to be a predictor of success. But certainly in the case of Android, had we not decided to go talk to some companies about validating our mobile phone OS idea, gone and talked to Google about that, again, we weren't trying to sell the company. We thought we could do it on our own. We would have been one of many Linux OS startups trying to revolutionize the mobile phone platform. It was that idea at the right time, right place, combined with Google, combined with the fact that the iPhone was going to be launching, which we didn't even know at the time, combined with processor speed, displays. It was this confluence of things that were happening, right place, right time. Back to the fishing analogy, you can have all the skill in the world. If there aren't fish, you're not going to catch anything. If you're in a school of mackerel, which is one of my daughter's favorites because she catches a lot of fish, you can catch mackerel very easily. You still have to have the right wiggly thing on the end of the lure to attract them. So you still have to be doing something interesting in order to get them to bite. Ultimately, I think these 2 things of, and I'm sure that the expert mentors in here can give you lots of other of their own examples from my past experience, that one of reaching for a bright and brilliant goal. And then number 2, being at the right place at the right time doesn't mean that it's only one point in time. It means working at it and continuing to work at it. And ultimately, if you believe in what you're doing, and if it's something that other people believe in, even if it takes them time to see that, the story of the Aeron chair that Herman Miller designed, and they thought was brilliant, but everybody thought was ugly until they, months and months, and after finally the first person started to say, wait, this is a great chair, and it went from all of these designers laughing at it and thinking it was the most horrible chair, it getting this amazing take-up and becoming the most successful chair ever. You just need to persist at what you're interested in doing and ultimately have it catch on and catch fire. And so with that, and with the fact that I think the slides aren't going to advance, we'll say thanks for listening and go create something amazing.